I had many, many fixed-rate pacemakers, but I didn't let that get in my way.
Welcome to Heart to Heart with Anna. I am Anna Jaworski and the host of your program. We are in our 14th season and we're happy you're joining us today. I'd like to start this show by thanking our first 4 brand new patrons of the Hug Podcast Network. The first one was Brenda Vignaroli. She's also our webmaster and an amazing friend and supporter, former board member, all-around fabulous person. Frank Jaworski, my better half, my awesome husband. Thank you for supporting the Hug Podcast Network. Joseph Jaworski, my firstborn son. I really appreciate you supporting us. And then Michael Lieben, who is the host of Heart to Heart with Michael, also a fabulous supporter, sound engineer, host, all-around great guy. You guys are fabulous. Thank you for supporting the Hug Podcast Network. And anyone can become a supporter. Just go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/heart-to-heart. Today's show features Ann Koplow, and our episode is entitled Shameless Appeals for Applause, a 66-year-old ccTGA heart warrior. Ann Koplow was born in 1953. Her first surgery occurred at age 10 in 1963 on November 22nd. She was at Children's Hospital in Boston for observation. They were treating her complete heart block with medication. They didn't know what her heart defect was, but we'll learn more about that in this episode. Ann was under observation because she was fainting and she was in complete heart block. Her heart stopped while being observed, so they decided to implant a pacemaker. Ann will be telling us about what was involved 55 years ago when people had pacemakers implanted. Ann has been through so much in her 60-plus years, and she's going to share with us what her experiences have been like, how she found the right doctor, and what plans she is making for the future. Welcome to Heart with Anna, Ann Koplow.
Hello, I'm shamelessly happy to be here.
So you got us off on the right foot. We're laughing already. This is going to be great, but the first thing that I have to ask you is very serious, and that is when your parents discovered you had a congenital heart defect.
They found out that I had complete heart block very soon after I was born.
Mm-hmm.
Complete heart block is when the atria and the ventricles, there's no electrical connection between the two, so the ventricles are just beating on their own. So they noticed that almost right away, and they took me to Children's Hospital in Boston. The doctors at Children's assumed that I had a ventricular septal defect, and there was actually nothing they could do for complete heart block back then. They were told to just take me home and treat me normally. They told my mother that I might faint, and she asked, how can you tell if a baby faints? So there was a lot of anxiety, I think, around me, and I was watched very closely. I would go to Children's once a year, but I was leading a pretty normal life. My heart rate got slower and slower as I grew. You can see it in my family pictures about how pale I started getting around the age of 9. They started giving me isopril, which was this really yucky medicine that I had to have under my tongue. They kept observing me, and it was making me really sick.
The medicine you had to take made you sick?
Yeah, so they gave me isopril, and the medicine made me feel really sick, and they kept bringing me in for more and more observation. So I was in the hospital a lot when I was, between the ages of 8 and 10.
So you probably missed a lot of school then, didn't you?
I kept up with school because that was such a priority. I didn't miss all that much school until my first surgery.
So did they have teachers that went to the hospital to teach you, or were there people at the hospital that just worked with you?
No, nothing like that. No, I just kept up. And I remember I would take the isopril under my tongue when I was in 6th grade. I would go into the bathroom and take it and feel really sick. But as far as I was concerned, I was still leading a really normal life, except for the times in the hospital.
Right. Well, tell us about that first surgery that you had.
I was in for observation at Children's Hospital. I had fainted a couple of times, but we thought it was because of the flu. And they had me there under observation. And I remember I was waiting for an EKG. I got up to get a drink of water because I was feeling lousy. And the next thing I do, I opened my eyes and all these people were standing over me. what they discovered was that I had had a heart stoppage. I mean, not a complete stoppage because, my heart started up again. But as soon as they realized that this was going on, then they decided I needed a pacemaker. But up to that point, no one had talked to me or my parents about pacemakers at all.
Isn't that surprising?
Well, in retrospect, it's not so surprising because pacemakers were so huge.
Yeah, and you were a little girl.
I was just a little girl. Yeah. I was a skinny little kid. I think they just didn't think of it as something that was appropriate for a kid. But once my heart stopped, there was no question that they had to do that.
Today, they often put the pacemakers under the clavicle and in the upper part of the chest. But tell us where they had to put yours.
So they had to put it in the abdomen. That was really the only place for it.
And can you tell us about how big it was?
I'm trying to think of something that let people really visualize how big these were. People remember the original Walkmans. That's about the size. Way too big for a child and really sticking out.
Yeah. So could you feel it?
Could I feel the pacemaker?
Mm-hmm.
When I saw the pacemaker for the first time, when they took the bandages off, I asked the nurse what that was because I saw this huge thing sticking out of my body. And the nurse said, that's your hip swollen from the surgery. I think because she just wasn't prepared to explain to a kid what that was. Then no one talked to me about it. The next time they removed the bandages, a doctor was there. And I said again, what's that? That's when they told me that's your pacemaker.
Oh, my goodness. That must have been so scary that here one of the grown-ups, somebody that you would have thought you could trust, was not honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the message to me was that this is something so weird and awful that grown-ups would lie about it. In retrospect, what I've realized is that the day of my first surgery was November 22nd, 1963. So that was the day that Kennedy was assassinated. And I think everybody was just freaking out.
Yeah, in shock.
Yeah, everyone was in shock. I think nobody was on their best behavior. And I think also they just didn't think that much about preparing children for surgery.
Right. Yeah. We've come a long way, Anne, haven't we?
So, yes, we have. We have come a long way.
And it's thanks to people like you. I consider you one of the pioneers, and you helped them to see you weren't just a guinea pig. You were a human being. You were a child who had a clear understanding that something was wrong with your body, but they weren't giving you the clear explanation that you needed to take away the scariness of it. And I think that we now know that that's not the right way to handle it.
I think doctors and nurses have learned a lot since then. They didn't let my parents stay overnight. I have all these memories of being in the hospital room with a monitor that made giant beeping noises. When I hear beeping noises from a robot that they use at the local supermarket, I actually get freaked out. It reminds me of the heart monitor that I was alone in the room with.
Texas Heart Institute were offering us a mechanical heart, and he said, no, Dad, I've had enough. Give it to someone who's worthy.
My father promised me a golden dress to twirl in. He held my hand and asked me where I wanted to go.
Whatever strife or conflict that we experienced in our long career together was always healed by humor.
Heart to Heart with Michael. Please join us every Thursday at noon Eastern as we talk with people from around the world who have experienced those most difficult moments.
Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective.
I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever.
You are listening to Heart with Anna. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. That's anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. Now, back to Heart with Anna.
And before the break, we were talking about your need for a pacemaker. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more about what it's been like having a pacemaker, especially since you had a fixed-rate pacemaker.
I had many, many fixed-rate pacemakers, but I didn't let that get in my way. I wasn't so much an athlete. My sister actually was the athlete of the family, and I was more of a scholar, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I did whatever I wanted to do. I didn't really feel like it slowed me down. I think if I'd been an athlete, I would have been more aware. I still did whatever I wanted to do. And in the 70s, when disco came out, I really loved to dance. And I became a disco dancer. I had the disco outfit. I would go to the discos. But I took lessons, and I went through all the different classes of disco, like Disco 1, Disco 2, Disco 3, and I made it to Disco 4, and I had a partner that was really great, and we, sort of looked like we were in Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, my gosh! That is so awesome. Do you have any photos of you in your costume with your partner?
I don't.
Oh,
that's so terrible. For a long time, I saved that disco dress, but then I stopped being able to fit into it. So I don't know where that is.
Oh, my gosh. But you just painted a picture in my mind, because who didn't love John Travolta back then and love that movie?
Right.
I can just see you doing it, Anne. I can just see you up there boogieing.
I was totally living the disco dream.
Oh, my gosh. How fun is that? Well, it's so nice to know that even though you had a fixed-rate pacemaker, it didn't slow you down.
It didn't. As I've gotten older, it's more age-appropriate that I'm having trouble on hills, so I don't feel so self-conscious about it.
There you go. There you go. I love your positive attitude, but I know that you've had a lot of adversity to overcome. Tell us about what it was like having pacemakers in the, late 60s, early 70s, and in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, what were some of the things that could go wrong?
I'm not sure about this, Anna, but I think everything that could possibly have gone wrong with my pacemakers went wrong between the ages of 10 and 17.
Oh, no.
They told me that the pacemaker would last 5 years, and I remember saying to my mother, forget it, I'm never going back to that hospital again. Try to catch me in 5 years. But the reality was I was in and out of hospitals all the time. The pacemaker ran out of juice way earlier than expected. The moisture from the body got into the pacemaker. The wires broke several times. They had to look for the wires. I have these scars that are really weird because they were looking for the wires so they could reattach them.
Oh,
I remember when this kept happening. I remember one day going in there, sitting in the doctor's office, and the doctor called someone and said, the Koplows are here with their lawyer, as a joke, because we were just in there all the time.
Oh, wow.
And then the worst part was that the pacemaker wires, which were sewn directly onto the heart during those dark days, came apart at the heart. Even before I left the hospital, I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid to tell anyone because I thought, this is really, really bad. And my fear was always that I might need heart surgery again. So I remember telling this one doctor that I trusted, I think there's something wrong with my pacemaker. And they often would say to me, and you're just anxious. And it's probably okay. And I remember being relieved and going home, and then sure enough, a week or so later, it became obvious that the wires had come apart at the heart. I was going to need heart surgery again, and that was in 8th grade. So that was only 2 years later after the first heart surgery.
Wow. Did you have any limitations after you had your heart surgery as far as any physical limitations at school?
No, it just took a long time to recover. That reminds me, though, of what happened when I had my first heart surgery. I really loved cats and really wanted a cat, but my mother was a kind of a neat freak, and she didn't want a cat in the house. So when I had my first heart surgery, I woke up from the heart surgery and said to my mother, quote, unquote, what have I got to look forward to if I don't have a cat?
Aww. Oh, no.
She tells that story, like, tears are streaming down her face, and she says, "Oh, look at you, a cat." And then this is how much I wanted a cat. When I woke up the second time, I said, "I really want a cat." She said, "I already promised you can have a cat."
Oh.
So this second operation, I really wanted a color TV.
Oh, my goodness.
So when I woke up, I said, "What am I going to look forward to if I don't have a color TV?" But, at that point, it was sort of a joke. I got a cat, and I got a color TV. So I think I'm telling you that story to illustrate that I did my best to get what I needed. I knew that having a cat would help me heal emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know whether the color TV was as good, but...
Oh, it was a distractor. That was the one thing when Alex was in the hospital at 17, you have all these wires and all these people coming in and looking at you. And he had brought his tablet and he was playing games on his tablet. And I thought, you go, Alex. We were playing Plants vs. Zombies. I'll never forget that. And that game actually has a tender spot in my heart because it was one thing that he could focus on to stop thinking about all the stuff that was going on around him. And maybe that's what your color TV was for you.
And I also think that I was well known in the hospitals for my positive attitude. They would actually send other kids to talk to me. This is at like 10 and 11 and 12 because I had such a positive attitude. I remember them sending a psychiatrist and him talking to me and then him saying that I seemed very well adjusted. I think it would have been nice for somebody to approach me and say, "This must be scary."
Yeah, to acknowledge that.
Nobody said anything like that. And I think we're all survivors. We do the best that we can. I just looked forward to going home. When I would go into the hospital, I actually would have all these quarters because this was the time of payphones, if anyone remembers those. And I would just load up on quarters and I would call all my friends.
Aww.
So I would get that connection.
Sure.
I did what I needed to do to get through this as unscathed as possible.
Hi, my name is Jamie Alcroft, and I just published my new book, The Tin Man Diaries. It's an amazing story of my sudden change of heart as I went through a heart and liver transplant. I can think of no better way to read The Tin Man Diaries than to cuddle up in your favorite Hearts Unite the Globe sweatshirt and your favorite hot beverage, of course, in your Hearts Unite the Globe mug, both of which are available at the Hug Podcast Network online store, or visit heartsunitetheglobe.org.
Heart to Heart with Anna is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more.
And in this segment, I really want to talk to you about how you continue to surprise your doctors, what problems ccTGA heart warriors might encounter as they age, and finally, I want us to talk about your blog. So let's go ahead and start by having you tell us how the doctors talked to you about having a baby and what ultimately happened.
When I was young, I remember doctors telling me I wouldn't be able to have children, and then things just evolved. I actually left children and found a wonderful cardiologist at Tufts Medical Center, Dr. Deep Salem, who's still my doctor to this day.
Wow.
And he was actually the one who discovered that I had ccTGA. When I transferred from children's to Tufts, he said, "I want to figure out why you have complete heart block." He had all sorts of different theories that he told me about. And I remember him saying, "Oh, it's possible. It's unlikely that it's this really rare heart defect." And they discovered, because he wanted to take a step back and look at it, that was when they discovered that I had ccTGA.
And what year was that, Anne? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was 1980. And I remember after I found out saying to my mother, you know how you always say two wrongs don't make a right? Well, it looks like you were wrong about that. Because the switch in the major vessels offset the switch in the ventricle so that all the blood gets to the right place.
Right, right.
But you asked me about having a child. So Dr. Salem thought it would be okay for me to have kids. And I got pregnant when I was 44 years old.
Wow.
That's what we all said. And then while I was pregnant, I actually looked at the research for ccTGA, and I found this article that was so awful because it said that people with ccTGA, the average lifespan was 50s, and I was 44.
Yikes.
So pregnancy went along. I was observed very closely. A month before the delivery date, I found out for the first time that I had endocarditis. I remembered my doctor telling me that that's the one thing that he worried about was I would get endocarditis. Never gotten it before. I was running a fever. He did the test, and then they called me and said, you have endocarditis, come in to the hospital right away.
Oh, my goodness. That must have been scary.
It was very scary, especially because the antibiotics that they gave me, they said might make the baby deaf.
Oh, how frightening.
Yep, but very scary. Nobody ever said, though, you must be scared.
Really? So nobody acknowledged that. They just expected you to keep plugging away because you were such a positive person.
I was. And then I had my child. And actually, the day that I got off the antibiotics was the day my water broke.
Wow.
Yeah. So I remember saying to my doctor, Dr. Salem, after all this, why do you think I asked to be tested for endocarditis? It's just so weird. And he said, I think somebody up there is watching over you.
Oh, definitely. It seems to me you definitely have angels watching over you, Anne.
Well, he said, I think someone up there is watching over you. And the person that I immediately thought of was my father. He died 2 months before I got pregnant.
Oh, no.
He never knew that he was going to have a grandchild. And that's the one regret I have in my life.
I think he was up there kind of orchestrating things for you, Anne.
Well, I like to think that way, Anna, but I don't know whether science would bear us out. But I like to think that way.
There's so much that we don't know. I am a very strong proponent of science, but there are so many miracles that have happened in my life that I have to believe in faith and in God and my angels. And I don't think you'd be here today, and I don't think I'd be talking to you if it wasn't for a mixture of both science and some heavenly intervention. And I think you are a miracle.
Why, thank you, Anna.
And I think your son's a miracle, too. So tell me, does your son have a hearing impairment?
He does not. I remember when I was still pregnant, they checked his heart. They said, your baby has a completely normal heart. And I remember thinking, wow, that's incredible. That I, with my heart, I've helped create this baby with a perfect heart.
Oh, what a beautiful story. That's so awesome. And at 44, I mean, there are a lot of perfectly heart-healthy people who are concerned to have a pregnancy in their fourth decade because there's a higher incidence of Down syndrome. There's a higher incidence of a number of birth defects. For some reason, it worked out in your favor. You made it through childbirth. Did you have to have a C-section or were you able to have a vaginal delivery?
They did a C-section just because the labor went on for so long. They said, we're not kidding around.
Right. I'm sure they didn't want to stress your heart any more than they absolutely had to.
Right.
I know that a lot of my friends who have ccTGA or who have other serious congenital heart defects, as they get into their fourth and their fifth decade and beyond, they start having new problems. Can you tell me what kind of medical problems you've experienced as you've aged?
I would get an echo every year. I really felt like I was very stable. Everybody was very happy with how I was doing. I would say that in maybe 2013, people were noticing that I was slowing down. I mean, it happened so gradually that I wasn't even aware of it. But my doctors started to get much more worried. People started talking to me about replacing my heart valve. Now, my heart valve had been leaking for a long time. My doctor just wanted to watch it to make sure it didn't get any worse, but it took its toll. I actually went into AFib because my atria got really large from the leakage.
Mm-hmm.
I really never wanted to have open heart surgery because of my bad experiences with the heart surgery when I was a kid.
Sure.
So I really wanted to avoid open heart surgery if possible. And some doctors were saying, you really need to have a heart valve replacement. But I didn't want to do that. So they tried different things. I got a biventricular pacemaker. And again, they watched me very carefully. But it became very obvious that I was really losing ground.
Mm-hmm.
And my doctor talked to me about the possibility of maybe a heart transplant. And what made it very confusing was that some of the doctors said you absolutely need a heart valve. You need to get a mechanical heart valve. And other doctors said, no, it's going to change the pressure in your heart and it's probably going to make it worse. So can you imagine?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Hearing such different stories. So I didn't know what to think. I consulted a whole bunch of specialists. Eventually, I went to the Mayo Clinic, and I met with Dr. Carol Warrens and also Dr. Dirani, the surgeon there, and they both said, you have to do this right away. And I said, well, my son is starting college. He's going to Edinburgh, Scotland. We're going to make a trip to Edinburgh before then. Can it wait till September? And this is in May. And I remember Dr. Warrens paused and thought, and she said, okay.
Oh, wow.
But during that time, I just got worse and worse. I started retaining a lot of fluid. I remember going to a concert and just having some popcorn, and just the salt was enough to make me really sick.
Sure.
So by the time I got that heart valve, I really needed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. You have a million stories, and we're going to have you come back on the show. But it's almost time to go, and I have one more question for you.
Okay.
I understand from my producer, David Franco, that you have a blog.
David Franco, who also has ccTGA.
Exactly, yes.
He's my heart brother.
Why don't you tell me about your blog and tell our listeners how they can find your blog, and then I know you're going to share something special with us.
So I have blogged daily since 2013. I have thousands of posts. The blog is annekoplow.wordpress.com. It's called The Years of Living Non-Judgmentally. You can find it just by looking for my name. And it helped me get through a lot of the uncertainties leading up to the heart valve replacement in 2016. Because I'm a group therapist and I'm a mother and I'm a singer-songwriter, the blog is all about that. There have been people with pacemakers and also people with CHD who have found my blog, and they comment. I actually thought I was the longest surviving person in the world with a pacemaker. My doctor thought that was a pretty sure bet because getting the pacemaker in 1963 when I was 10, they weren't aware of anybody that had had a pacemaker longer than that. But through my blog, I actually heard from this woman. She contacted me and she said, I actually got my pacemaker in 1961, which was 2 years before me.
Wow. But still, that's just amazing. So is it Ann Koplow, ANNKOPLOW.wordpress.com?
That is correct.
Okay. So that's how they can find your blog. And you're a singer-songwriter. So would you kindly serenade us with a song?
Okay. I'm just going to sing the first verse and chorus of one of my soon-to-be hit songs, okay, called Shameless Appeals for Applause, okay?
Awesome.
Ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
I've made it to age 65. Nothing stands in the way of my passion and drive. I was born with heart problems, but I'm still alive. Those are shameless appeals for applause. They're all true and reliably caused. Clapping and oohs and some ahs. Those shameless appeals for applause.
Yay! I love it. That explains the title of this show. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much, Anne, for coming on this show today and talking to us about, wow, so many different experiences of living with ccTGA.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Anna. It's been a real pleasure.
And the pleasure has been all mine. And that does conclude this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna. Thanks for listening today, my friends. Please check out our Patreon page. We'd love for you to become a patron of our program. Check out our Hug Podcast Network page, or you can visit our website and be part of our network. You can get behind-the-scenes information, be invited to special recordings, to Q&As with our guests, and even more. Check out heartsunitetheglobe.org for more information. And remember, my friends, you are not alone.
Thank you again for joining us this week. We hope you have been inspired and empowered to become an advocate for the congenital heart defect community. Heart to Heart with Anna, with your host Anna Jaworski, can be heard every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time.